I'm heating up soup with some bread in it, so that's good.
It's a nice day for grilling, actually. It's beautiful outside. What a lovely fall day.
Who knows? Might take the computer out there and when I get home and start some grilling.
There you go.
I got Wi-Fi, so.
Okay, excellent. Okay, I have 5 o'clock, so we'll call the October 26, 2022 Transportation Commission meeting to order. Stefan, if you could read the instructions for us, please.
Absolutely. All right. Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members of the commission, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video when you're speaking. In this meeting, panelists have the ability to unmute themselves. Please use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Staff, please use the raise hand feature. If you're asked a question, lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. Staff will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair Kovich, floor is yours.
Oh, thanks, Stefan. Aiden, if you could call the roll, please.
Sure thing. Charles Miazzi.
Present.
Barbara Harrington McKinney. I don't see it. Chris McCahill.
Here.
Ann Kovich.
Here.
Denise Jess.
Here.
Robbie Weber.
Here.
Patricia Bennett.
Here.
Bridget Brown. We don't see it. Bill Bremer.
Here.
Harold Cleames.
Here.
And Darren Wozniewski.
Present.
Okay, so it looks to me like we are missing 2 people at the moment. So both Harold and Darren would be able to vote. And I have a new system, Harold, with little boxes I can check. So I'm going to try and keep up with who's here. Better keep up. I try to, but this might be a better system. Okay, did everybody have an opportunity to look at the minutes from last time? Bill?
I'll make a motion for approval of the minutes.
Okay, there's a motion. Darren, I assume that's a second?
It is a second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, we'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, the motion passed unanimously. Any public, I don't believe so, but I'll just double check. Is there any public comment this evening?
There is none.
Okay. How about disclosures or recusals this evening? Okay, seeing no hands. All right, so let's move on to item number 2, which is the initial concept design, fabrication, installation of the site-specific public art feature at the Metro Transit Maintenance Facility. And I believe we have, I know I saw Mary Rose on. Is Karen on as well, Mary Rose, or are you going to do the introduction?
I am here and ready.
Okay. And do you have the PowerPoint? I believe the artist is with us. I think she's in the attendees.
Yep.
Did you want?
Here. Yeah.
Okay. We could certainly promote her to a panelist so that if you want, she could be seen as well, Mary Rose.
Are you asking? I'm confused, but yes, I think that's preferable if you can elevate her to a panelist.
Sure. Could you please do that, Stefan?
Sure.
Promoter or whatever the heck you call it.
All right, Jenny should be joining us here.
Okay, great. There we go. Wonderful. Welcome. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Mary Rose. Are you going to lead us off?
Hi, I'm Karen Wolf. I'm the arts administrator for the city.
Oh, okay. It says Mary Rose on my screen. So.
Oh, I think we're both here. We work together.
Okay.
Yes. And so I just as an introduction, I don't know if you all recall that the city passed a % for art ordinance a couple of years ago that would allocate 1% of city funds on project budgets to enable us to have a designated funding stream to purchase public art that is site specific for a building or a place. And this is the first time that ordinance has been implemented to generate revenue that will allow us to commission an artist to do something for the Metro Transit building. So in May of 21, we issued a request for qualifications for a public art piece for that facade on East Washington Avenue. And in February of 22, the Madison Arts Commission selected 4 finalists to develop a preliminary concept and design for that site out of 32 applications. So Jenny was one of the finalists, and in October, the Madison Arts Commission reviewed those proposals. It's the same proposal you'll be seeing tonight. And the Madison Arts Commission is recommending to council that this commission be awarded to Jenny Gao. So we are seeking tonight your direction to council on that resolution, whether you recommend them to adopt that or not. And that would allow us to contract with her and have her fabricate final designs. So a few things have shifted about the site. It's an ongoing construction project. So the artist needs to be flexible and work with city staff and engineers to make sure that the project is catered to the new reality. So what you're looking at is a concept and a design that will be later fleshed out and engineered and made into a final proposal. So she will be able to answer some more general questions about the work in the proposal, but specifics are coming at a later time. Are there any questions for me at this point? If not, I will introduce the artist and turn it over to her.
I don't think so. It shows you with Karen Wolf now on the screen. So.
Okay. So seeing none, Jenny, if you can turn on your camera, and I have the PowerPoint, but if you have the abridged version that's more presentation friendly in a short format, you could pull that up.
Sure. Yeah. So you'll be the one sharing it, correct, Karen? Are you sharing the slides or am I sharing the slides?
If you need me to assist, I can. I have the longer presentation. Otherwise, since you're elevated to a panelist, you can flip through the bridge.
So I can flip through my own slides.
Yes, we'll just need to submit it to staff to be attached to the minutes, since it's slightly different than the full version.
Sure.
Is it the one that was submitted to the Urban Design Commission? Because we have that saved in Legistar already.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So no big emails coming.
That's correct. Yeah. So I'll be presenting the abridged version for this meeting.
And just a note, I got an email from Aiden saying that it was recommended by the Urban Design Commission. So they took action on it already tonight.
Yeah, that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. One moment while I get us loaded up here.
While she's doing that, John, I'm sorry, I didn't connect with you. Do you have any other context to add? John Evans is the project manager for the Metro Transit site, and I hadn't seen him there, so I didn't ask for him. But do you have anything you need to share?
No, I'm happy to, if questions come up and there's things I can answer, I'm happy to do that. and just say that we're really excited to finally be doing something on this facade of the building. As you guys know, there's been a lot of construction happening at Metro, continuing to happen over the next couple of years. And this is just a really lovely, in my opinion, a really lovely way to sort of spruce up the corridor and kind of put a shine to our building. So yeah, Jenny, please take it away.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, John. All right, can everyone see my presentation?
We can, thank you.
Okay, great. All right, I'll go ahead and start. Right. Hello, everyone. My name is Jenny Gao. I'm a full-time artist and entrepreneur, and I've been running an anti-gentrification arts business for 8 years. I am thrilled to present a proposal for the Metro Transit Public Art Project here in Dezhou, land of the Ho-Chunk, also known as Madison, Wisconsin. A question that is at the foundation of my practice is, how can public art be a force for public good? I believe the answer lies in whose perspectives we engage and center in the public art process. For the Metro project, I conducted interviews with 27 people who rely on Madison buses, 70% of them BIPOC. This is in contrast to City of Madison's most recent 2019 survey of bus riders, where 84% of those surveyed were white, despite Madison's highly diverse bus ridership. I also interviewed city employees, not all of whom can rely on the buses, despite all city employees having access to a free bus pass. The concept that emerged from these interviews is one that conveys the experience of commuting from the perspective of the bus rider. The artwork, entitled "The Time Is Ours," embodies a feeling that many bus riders expressed, that even people with the longest commutes feel ownership over their time spent in transit. They don't have to mind traffic, and the time is theirs to reflect, to read, and to do as they choose. For many people, access to public transit means having independence. Each section starts with a portrait of a person looking out the window. Through their gaze, I aim to convey the passage of time, distilled to motifs that are subtle but distinct signifiers of life in Madison. The first section shows us melting ice and the first spring crocuses. The second section offers us sunflowers and summer cicadas. The third section offers fluffy milkweed pods and migrating geese. The fourth and final section shows us snow and empty space. This fourth section also starts where tree cover increases along the building, so it will be the most covered in the summer and most visible in winter. I also want to emphasize the strengths of the site through this process. I've heard a lot of city employees half joke about this big beige wall with this fear that the building is a blight on the neighborhood in its current state. And while their tone is lighthearted, it's seated in a real concern that the building is ugly. And personally, I think this site is really beautiful. East Washington Avenue is a noisy, hot 6-lane highway that bisects the isthmus, and there's a lot of bare, hot concrete and sidewalks with very little setback from the road. Meanwhile, Madison Metro Transit System has one of the few stretches of East Wash of full-grown trees, a setback lawn, and full shade. This block stays much cooler than the surrounding area, making it significantly more pedestrian-friendly than much of East Wash. And so my intention is for the artwork to end before the heaviest tree cover begins. This way, it will not be necessary for the city to remove tree cover for the visibility of this artwork. The building itself is an amazing canvas. I designed the motifs as large silhouetted shapes that are legible from multiple distances. The brushed aluminum has a matte, non-reflective surface, so the panels won't be distracting to drivers. Additionally, the artwork is aligned with UDC's core development principles for this district. The wall-based artwork enhances the iconic view of the Capitol. Community engagement strengthens neighborhood identity. The art is legible for people using many means of transit, and it provides vibrant engagement for pedestrians to enjoy East Washington Avenue. I plan to use Dibond aluminum composite panels for the construction of the silhouettes. These panels are lightweight and will be easy to maintain. I'll also be using an exterior grade mural paint directly on the wall surface, which is durable in all weather conditions. Anti-graffiti coating will protect the work from vandalism. UV protective coating will prevent sun fading. In closing, there are many reasons why I'm passionate about this project. I lived in the Tenny Lapham neighborhood for 9 years. I started my business here in Madison, and my old studio and home are blocks away from the Metro facility. This is a place where I felt deeply rooted for a long time. It's also a place where I'm very familiar with the challenges. Wisconsin ranks 49th in the nation for arts funding, and Madison's new Percent for Art program is something that many people have fought to have restored, and it demonstrates the city's investment in cultural development. The Metro project is the first project to be funded by Madison's Percent for Art program. There are 77 pages of public comments in support of the Metro Public Art Project, and the comments almost unanimously endorse me as the artist that the city hires. As a woman of color, I can attest to how rare it is for people like me to win large-scale public art commissions like this one. The City of Madison will send a powerful message to its constituents by hiring me for the first Present for Art project. I have no doubt that public support played a key role in me winning this recommendation. Many people took the time to engage with the civic process and share their voices because they care about the design of their communities and whom that effort includes. I wish for us to honor that trust and ask that you, the commissioners, support me too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. I know I looked at the finalist presentations this summer and was very impressed. And I'm very excited about seeing this happen. Comments or questions for Jenny? Bridget, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to say how thrilled I am at this proposal. What I think the artist did to take into account the place and the people and really translate that into public art is going to be such a great amenity for the neighborhood and for the city. I'm just thrilled, and it makes me glad to live downtown and near this building. So thank you. And if there isn't more discussion, I'd be happy to move approval to send this on up the chain for the next level of approvals.
Okay, well, we have 3 other hands raised, so why don't we hold your motion until we hear from the other folks, and then we'll look for a second. Robbie, go ahead.
I'll just make it short. I think this is such a lovely project. I mean, sometimes you see a presentation on Zoom and it's hard to grasp what it's going to look like, but this looks just really exciting. And I think it'll be a real enhancement for this area because that is kind of a big blank wall right there. So that's all.
Thank you. Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Ann. Jenny, thank you. This is really awesome. I love, my comments would echo Bridget's quite significantly. I have one question, and I really appreciate that your image starts with bus riders, because that's who the system is all about. And so I'm super curious, given that people with disabilities are very high bus riders as well, since many of us are non-drivers, how that demographic has been incorporated into the art.
Yeah, that is an excellent question. So part of it was in the interview process. So I made sure to have the interview itself available in multiple formats. So I did have a few people who say wouldn't be able to do an in-person or a verbal interview session. So I made sure that it was available to people who say are deaf, for instance, and they would be able to participate in this process as well via the type of survey that I set up. So there was that level of engagement included in the interviews with bus riders. As far as the artwork itself, part of what I would like to do once this piece is fabricated is to have a plaque that is also tactile. So this is going to be ongoing conversations with you, Karin, but to have a plaque that has some of the CNC cutout shapes that are in the wall itself. So there are these CNC cutout shapes of aluminum, and I'd like to have those replicated smaller as part of the plaque so people can actually feel them and feel what those shapes are up close on a smaller scale. So I'd like to have that as the informational engagement portion of this mural.
That's super cool. Yeah, to make that tactile available for those of us with vision loss. So thank you. Thanks for being inclusive in the interviews and then thinking about how to bring us into the experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Denise. Bill, go ahead.
Thank you. And actually, Jenny, you answered my question and you mentioned it about a plaque, and I'm glad to hear that because I think we'll have their artwork for many, many decades, but I think an explanation sometimes when people go by and say, well, that's interesting, where'd that come from? But to know the history, and so to have something at a small scale that can be looked at and read about some of the background of the artwork, be great. Is it going to be outside or is it going to be inside the Metro in their lobby, or is it going to be outside? Is that part of the
imagine being outside? Yeah, normally plaques
Okay.
are outdoors in a company.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's just,
Mhm.
so this has already been thought about as far as how to do that. Yeah, and that's part of the project. So that's great. I have one other comment. I didn't realize this is the first project that the city has used the 1% art for. I mean, we've had public artwork on other public works projects, but I guess that was just not part of the program that now is how this is being developed as far as the project, right? That's what you're saying? So this is the first time this ordinance has been used for that.
That's
I didn't
correct.
realize that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we're
Thank
in a
you.
historic moment for Madison.
How
Great.
exciting, hey? Very
Yeah.
exciting. Denise, your hand is up. Did you have another comment? Okay, we have a motion to approve, and let me just say I'm very excited about it as well. And thank you so much for joining us and sharing the presentation. So it's very exciting. So Bridget made a motion. Do we have a second? Alder Miadzi, that's a second.
Yes, seconding it.
Okay, Bridget, did you wish to speak to your motion anymore? You spoke eloquently before.
The only thing I guess, and I probably should have mentioned this before, something maybe for the city to consider the anti-graffiti coating. So I've worked with that a lot, and it lasts through a few graffitiings, and then it kind of no longer has that property. And so for the city, I think to be prepared to reapply that is probably going to be needed to ensure the long life of the artwork. So just a note on that, but that's the only other thing I wanted to say.
Okay. Alder Miadzi, your hand is still up. Did you have anything else to add? Okay, great. Is there any further discussion? Okay, we'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. Seeing no hands, it passes. And verbal round of applause. Thank you so much. Very, very exciting. I can't wait to see it done. So thank you for joining us tonight, Jenny. Very, very grateful to have you here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure to be here, and I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah. Take care.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Next on the agenda, we don't get to have exciting things like that happen at TC all the time. That was fun. Is Chris with us? We have item number 3, which is Acacia Ridge. Oh, is that you, Sean?
Yep, I'll be handling these 3 tonight.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Sean.
So let me share my screen. Okay, so the first one I have tonight for review and feedback on private development is Casey Ridge, Phase 8. And this is the exhibit, and I do apologize for not including a phase map. So I'm going to go to the, I guess, the plat. And hopefully you can see that I changed the documents here.
Mm-hmm.
Something with the blue box.
Yes, we can see that. Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. So this
Hey, I'm in this meeting here, but I don't have
Yes, Alder?
oh, sorry about that. I forgot to mute myself. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Sean.
So this is the Phase 8 of Acacia Ridge plat on the far west side. Valley View Road is to the south. South Point is to the west, and then to the north is Watts Road. So Phase 8 is this phase here. I I guess I'd like to call out that, in this phase, near this phase, there's a planned site for a new school and a area park. That's in this large area here. So going back to the phase in the drawing, we have a section of Redden Drive. The next portion to the north has already been built. There's a bike path that crosses Redden just to the north at a tabletop crossing, and the path goes along the east side of this future park, and then with the park we'll end up connecting on the north side of these lots. So I just want to call that out, that when the park gets built, that path connection will be made. Redden is a pretty large neighborhood collector street, so we kind of have the standard collector cross section there, 48-foot streets. That's 8-foot parking lane, 6-foot bike lanes, and 10-foot travel lanes. And then in this area where they kind of have this offset T, there's no parking, so we have that narrowed up to 34 feet. Rustic Pine Road is the street that's just south of the school and park site. And White Sky Pass, we're doing, I guess, the northern section of that street so that we can build the alley and give access to these lots here. All these lots on Rustic Pine on the south side of this block will be access to the alley. White Sky Pass connects to Valley View to the south, along with Redden. So pretty minor phase. We're kind of just building off what the adjacent phases are. Tawny Acorn, I guess I missed that one. Tawny Acorn is a 32-foot street that we have proposed that extends to South Point. So this would connect Tawny Acorn all the way to South Point, and actually connects over South Point to the west even further. So that's a connection we've been waiting to make. With that, I can take any questions about this, the Casey Ridge Phase 8.
Comments or questions for Sean? I'm not seeing any hands. Oh, there we go. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
I think this comes back to many conversations that we've had in the past about like these edge of town developments. I know that TPPB on Monday talked about the complete green streets policy and like maybe trying to make sure that that will include some guidance on the typical cross sections for when we build things from scratch, as we are doing here. That's not ready yet, so I guess we'll just go ahead with what we have here. I guess my one concern, as I have often had with these kind of things, that Redden Drive, it's a wide cross section. It will have parking on both sides. Probably the parking is not going to be heavily used because this is all low density residential where people have driveways and garages. So it will be a very wide road. And so it's good that we have that speed hump on there, but I foresee that speeds are still going to be high. But I also understand that this is just continuing the cross section that you already have built. So yeah, I guess that's just what it is. But maybe think about if there's anything you can do to keep speeds down there so that we then don't have to come back 3 years from now and start adding speed humps or coming up with other ways to slowing drivers down.
Yeah, excellent point, Harold. Your comments, Sean?
Yeah, that's good feedback. We're kind of in an interesting place right now. Complete green streets, being eminent, but at the same time, we got to kind of finish some of what we've started and follow the ordinance as well. So, definitely putting in speed humps as much as we can. Getting these in. When the developer is building the streets, we're definitely trying to do that. I'm also hoping that this narrow section helps with that, especially as we approach the park. So I understand Carl's comment, and we're hoping complete green streets come sooner rather than later, and we don't run into these issues. Hopefully it simplifies things.
Yeah, well, Safe Streets Madison also says that we need to be proactive as we're doing this reconstruction and think about these things. Alder Tischler, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for letting me talk. I am just jumping in kind of at the last minute here. And I know you probably talked about this earlier, but does this area also include sidewalks then on all the streets?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Just double checking. Thanks.
Okay. No, you're always welcome. Other comments or questions? Just take another look at it, Sean, and think about that traffic speed, because it's something that we hear all the time from people, and the narrower the streets, the more it tends to slow people down. Robbie, go ahead.
So, well, Harold beat me to exactly what I was going to bring up anyway. But I'm curious, that narrow section there, how wide is that narrow section?
We have it at 34 feet, so that you could have 7-foot bike lanes and the 10-foot travel lane. So basically just the parking is eliminated and the bike lanes continue through that section.
Okay. I mean, I understand you're trying to put generous bike lanes there, but it just seems that that seems really wide for an area. I don't know. What are you anticipating the traffic volumes are going to be? Does the whole street need to be that wide to handle the traffic?
I guess as a typical collector, we're expecting probably around 5,000 when it's all built. This connects pretty much from Midtown up to Mineral Point. As a collector, because this turns into Red Tail as it goes south. So we do expect a decent amount, and then the wideness is the expected need for a bike facility. So we expect that we're going to need bike lanes and parking. So I guess we expect 5,000 vehicles or so, and that's pretty decent for a neighborhood collector.
You said you anticipate the need for parking. Isn't most of this residential? And don't most of the residences have multiple off-street spots? Where's the need for parking going to come from?
Yeah, that's a good point. We are seeing that. Sugar Maple is another example, but some of the reality is that in the ordinances, chapter 16 for these 80-foot cross sections, it's recommended that the 48 cross section for that. So I'd say our hands are tied a little bit with that, but I guess I would agree that we're not seeing it parked up as much as expected. But that's why we ended up putting bump outs at every intersection. Hope that slows down traffic.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I know that we still have got these legacy standards that require these wide streets and on-street parking, even though there's, abundant off-street parking. It just does feel like we're setting ourselves up for future problems where people are going to be complaining about speeding just because the road is too wide. There's too much empty space without the need, without the if you don't use the parking, then it's just empty space and it creates a wide open highway feel. So I guess we can't get our green streets stuff passed fast enough. So thank you.
Thank you, Robbie. Darren, go ahead.
Yeah, and I understand that this is just one more phase in this, and so it's just a general comment or question. In planning, as you mentioned, the layout of the street, the cross section of the street, it was parking, bike lane, travel lane. And my comment is, I just hope we can sometime get to bike lane, parking, travel lane to give these bikes a protected thing, especially as fast as these cars are going to go down the street. We've got a school in a parking lot or in a park. And so I hope that the city will sometimes realize let's prioritize, decenter the automobile in all of this, and get to doing the hierarchy that Safe Street says we're supposed to do, and look at pedestrians and bicyclists before the automobiles.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Darren. Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. That was Darren's comments were similar to mine. I'm thinking about safe routes to school and, getting the littles who will be walking. And so I'm looking at this wider street and wondering where the safe crossings would be. Yeah, I definitely I'm worried about the littles trying to make it to school. So I think, how do we factor in that more vulnerable pedestrian traffic into the design?
Sean, your comments about that?
Yeah, so I guess what I would expect is just north of here, it's a phase that's already been built. Is kind of the regional path crossing that is going to come down into the park, and connect to where the school is. That's actually a tabletop crossing right now. It's bumped out and there's a tabletop there. So, I guess children and pedestrians coming from the north, I would expect that to really be the logical crossing there, and be a pretty good safe crossing there. As you come from the south, we do have bump outs at various intersections, that would facilitate safe crossings. We definitely plan to have the speed hump right before the Rustic Pine Redden intersection, because we do expect a lot of people to be crossing there, getting to the school in the park.
Does that help, Denise, or did you have any follow-ups? Darren, you were good with what you heard?
Yeah, I think just as you keep working on the design, it just, it's hard to remember because there's not a school there now, but there will be. So just really, again, building for that vulnerable population, I think is really, really, and I'm most concerned about the kids coming from the south.
Yeah, and that's addressed in Complete Green Streets as well. Some of the checklists that we saw on Monday night. Patricia, go ahead.
I'm just really frustrated by all of the comments that we don't need parking. I live by two schools. Neither one of them have parking for the teachers. So both sides of the street are parked every day, summer, winter, whenever, for the teachers to park. We all have my road has a lot of people with driveways, but there's still a lot of people that park on these streets. And I'm just frustrated by let's get rid of all the parking. I think we need to look at certain cases that maybe that's not always true. And how do we know that the school that's going to be built will have enough parking for all the teachers on site? That's all. I just need to say that.
Okay, and Sean, I'm assuming you don't know anything about that at this point?
No, just that the site has been designated for a school in the future. So other than that, that is true. We do have, some parking issues around schools, especially the ones that are closer downtown. But to me, it does seem like a lot of the schools, I guess I'm thinking Pope Farms in general, up on Shave and Old Sauk, they do have a generous parking lot on site, but with the park also included here, we do expect some parking, especially on weekends, for kids' soccer games, things like that, that they'll need some access to. And parks that typically don't have their own parking lots, so it's definitely something to consider.
Okay, thank you. Any follow-up there, Pat? Are you good?
No, I'm not, because I live on the near west side and we have two schools within a block of each other with no parking. And it also is the biggest area for soccer. So everybody has to park on the street. I'm just frustrated with let's just get rid of all street parking. That's all.
So you're just saying that we need to think about the other uses, the users of the schools and the parks and those, as we're considering the parking.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thanks for that. Bill, go ahead.
Thank you, Ann. And I certainly understand where Pat is coming from, but I guess at the same time, I just, listening to the presentations and where we are with getting green streets passed, and I think it's, the sooner the better. And I agree with Robbie and others that have said, so we can incorporate that into new construction, not just reconstruction. We've got examples of reconstruction projects that we've gone through here in the last couple of years of Old Middleton Road and Hammersley and so forth, where we have eliminated the parking. Now, they don't have schools directly next to it, but there's businesses on Old Middleton and so forth. But we have eliminated parking, and we did it on Whitney Way. And so, we are getting rid of the parking. I guess, Pat, as far as my comments regarding, I thought about that as far as parking with the parks, that if we use parkland and to build parking lots, but it seems like we agree, people want to get there from a distance, they drive. And so maybe we have to use land that is set aside for parking lots, just to make it fully usable by everybody that needs to or wants to use that park. So, but I would, this is an example of that we're going to have parking. Sean, you mentioned something. Do we have to allow parking as part of the development? We tell the developer, you're not going to have parking on this block? Did you say there's an ordinance?
We do have some flexibility, but in general, when the right-of-way lists are set, the Chapter 16 general planning subdivision regulations does call for specific cross sections. So the typical in an 80 is 48. So the way that we interpret is that we have to have that for I guess the majority of the street. And I guess we have some flexibility. We haven't run into a lot of issues with that, but I guess generally we try to follow the guidelines that we have.
Yeah, so I guess I understand that we're caught between we haven't got green streets enacted yet as a city ordinance, but when that happens, will those other ordinances get looked at?
Yes, that's the discussion we've had, is that that logically would be the next step, is that they would be updated to match
so we can do it, so not just on reconstruction but on new construction.
Yeah. That's the intent.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this project is just kind of in between the cracks, I guess, as far as trying to tie in with what we have. But I certainly agree with all the comments that have been made about, do we need that parking? Because it probably won't be used unless it's far enough or close enough to the park that it would be used as far as park. But I agree we need parking for teachers too, and people that are going to attend a meeting at the school. So where do they park? It's got to be on the property, or because I don't think we should necessarily build it into our infrastructure on streets for the school to have adequate parking. I don't think it's. I think we're concerned about safety, school children and children going to parks. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thanks, Bill. Darren, go ahead.
Thank you. Sean, something you said kind of triggered just a question I had in the design of that intersection of Rusted Pine Road and Redden. Has it been explored to prioritize the pedestrians, especially school children? As you said, you expect them to cross there, to do a raised intersection or tabletop crossings and prioritize people walking versus people driving automobiles?
So I was kind of thinking about that as we were talking. I've not discussed that, I guess, with engineering, but that's something like we can certainly look into and see if that can be added. I mean, I have no idea if that would have any drainage issues or anything like that, or if they would have any maintenance concerns, but that is certainly something that we can look into before this goes to board.
Thanks. Yeah, I just see that as being better serving than. I appreciate the speed bump there, but if you're coming south on there, you really don't get to the speed bump till after the intersection. And I've seen people on the speed bumps around me who speed up very quickly right after they get over those things, especially if there isn't anything coming up in the near future. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Great suggestion. Sean, take a look at that. Robbie, go ahead.
Yeah, I just feel like I have to point out that we really need to look at both street design and including parking in the context of what are the adjacent land uses and what they look like as well. I mean, I live in a neighborhood that was built pre-World War II, pre-Depression, when very few people had cars. Matter of fact, I'm fairly certain my house never had a driveway when it was built. And it's near the UW, it's near West High, it's near downtown, it's near bus lines, and the streets are 100% parked up all the time. I mean, I have space for one car between the sidewalk and the front of my house, and that's it. It's a very different neighborhood and a very different need for street parking than a district that we are building from scratch that is likely to have a minimum of 4 off-street parking spots for every residential unit. Single family home, I should say. And a brand new school that has yet to be built that is likely to have significant parking for staff, including teachers, as well as a pickup and drop off zone off street. And then for meetings, most of the staff are not going to be there. So parents can use the staff parking when they come for meetings. And the same thing with businesses. I mean, businesses are being built in new areas on the edge of town with significant off-street parking. And the on-street parking, if we provide it, is just empty space. So that encourages speeding. So I just want to point out that I am not advocating removing parking everywhere. I'm sure my neighbors would have my neck if I suggested removing parking on my street. But I also want to point out that one person has to pull over to let another person pass on my street. You pretty much can't speed if there's a car coming the other direction because somebody's going to have to pull over to allow passing. That makes it safe for people to bike and even stand in the middle of the street and talk to their neighbors. So it's the context of what is built in the area. And when we're building brand new, we're building with a lot of off-street parking, and the on-street parking simply is not needed. And that's why we've removed parking on some streets to build bike lanes, because there already is enough off-street parking and it isn't being used. So I just want to point out that we're not suggesting removing all on-street parking. Areas that were built pre-World War II, even pre, 1960, probably need that on-street parking. But ones that are built new do not.
Okay, thanks, Robbie. Yeah, Complete Green Streets is going to help us out a lot. Parking, I would just note, is at the very bottom of the modal hierarchy in Complete Green Streets. So, but it certainly has to be taken into account because clearly we do need parking in certain places. So, other comments or questions? Sean, you got a lot of comments tonight, some of which directly impact what we're talking about, and others which are very helpful conversations that will help us move forward once we get Complete Green Streets. So, Chris, I'm sure you're listening to a lot of this conversation and, can take it back to TPPB as there are more conversations coming up soon on Complete Green Streets as well. Other comments or questions? Sean, do you have any comments or questions? Alder Tischler, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say I wish we were starting from scratch in District 11, where we're most of our neighborhoods were built in the 1950s, to be walkable neighborhoods. But the comments that I'm getting from a lot of people are, we have very straight streets. People can drive very fast. We're the ones that you guys slowed down some of that with the speed limit. But the things that I'm hearing a lot from people, and again, this is probably maybe muscle memory or remembering when lanes were double lanes. Now we reduce them to single ones. But I'm getting a lot of comments from residents who are concerned about people passing in bike lanes, which and asking for having more, the intersections and the bike lanes be clearly marked, different color paints, things like that, and also having the crosswalks. The other things I'm hearing from are crosswalks that have the hash marks, ones that are just straight lines. And I guess my kids ask the question, what's the difference between those? So just from a more established neighborhood, starting from scratch, those are some of the things that I am hearing, especially as we're adding thousands and thousands of new people in my district. And the last thing, since I'm on a rant, and then I'll be quiet, is with the new bus route, especially the bus rapid transit. If anyone's ever tried to park during the day along like Rennebaum Park, a lot of people will drive to those streets to park and then hop on the bus. So just especially as we start designing a bus that's going to be running every 15 minutes, and people who might be driving in from surrounding parts of the city and from surrounding communities. Some of these areas, if this is close to a bus route, just factor that in, that people are going to try to park just to hop on the bus because they won't be able to park downtown. So just factoring that in. So, but thanks for letting me talk. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Sean, do you want to talk about Continental crosswalks real quick?
Sure. The idea behind the Continental Crosswalk and why that's I guess preferred treatment when we can is that it's definitely more visible because there's more area I guess parallel with where you're driving. So the visibility is much better than the typical two-line crosswalk. It definitely is more maintenance and more cost. But we kind of pick and choose best spots to put that. Where we can. I would expect to see a lot of that around the school in particular. We definitely did a big project on East Washington last year. If you've driven down it, you'll see that all the crosswalks have been upgraded to Continental, really, it's just the visibility is much better, and it's something you definitely notice, as you come across them. So, we try to do that as much as possible around schools and high pedestrian areas.
Great, thanks. So Alder Tischler, you can take that back. Take that back to your family in terms of the explanation. Other comments or questions? Okay, great discussion. And it's why we're all paying a lot of attention to the discussions about complete green streets, which we'll cover later on, because that was just at TPPB on Monday. Any other comments or questions for Sean? Sean, you've gotten a lot of feedback. Do you have any questions back with regard to any of it?
No, I think the main thing is, I'll investigate the tabletop. I thought that was a good idea. So I will see if that is possible, and then take a look at other traffic calming in the area. So, a lot of good feedback, as you said.
Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so Sean, you're up for the next one as well.
Yep.
Atticus Way.
Yep. We got 3 A projects today: Acacia Ridge, Atticus, and American Center. So
that's right.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So this next project is complicated. So feel free to ask questions at any time. What I have shown here is the Allied Duns Marsh Physical Improvement Plan. So it's the neighborhood plan that was adopted in 2005. So, it's about 17 years old. And the street in question, you can see this cursor, I got this box around it, is the Atticus Way extension, which is built to this curve right here. And I guess what's necessitating this discussion is the proposed redevelopment of the roller rink, which is tucked in behind Discount Tire and this strip mall on Verona Road. It's if you haven't been back there, it's kind of hidden back there, and it's proposing to redevelop into an apartment building. And with the neighborhood plan, it will call for the extension of Atticus Way, eventually to Red Arrow Trail. And this would need cooperation from both the existing McDonald's site, which is also proposing to redevelop in the near future. They're not as far ahead as the roller rink site, but they are proposing to reconstruct the McDonald's into a new McDonald's, upgrade it. So what I have here today is the extension of Atticus into a cul-de-sac, temporary condition, and then a proposed alignment for the future of Atticus Way extending to Red Arrow Trail once McDonald's redevelops. And we still have to discuss with McDonald's and agree upon alignment, but this is an alignment that we feel works for everyone. So the roller rink site's kind of driving this discussion and this need for the extension along their northern property line. So yeah, this is the site plan. This is the proposed cul-de-sac, and I have a couple more detailed drawings. This is just a zoomed in version of the site, so you can kind of get your bearings. And here is what we're proposing as the Atticus Way extension. We have a T into a north-south street with no name at this point in the future. Sidewalk on both sides. Pretty narrow cross section because we have limited space on each side for the street. And one thing that I thought was kind of exciting is with this sidewalk, we are proposing an extension to the north. Let's see if I can go back. So the city has an existing remnant from the Verona Road project of an access. So we're proposing to have the sidewalk go north and then connect to Verona Road. And there's a bus stop right up here that is a really nice direct connection to the bus stop there. So I'm pretty excited about that. So yeah, this is an apartment building. So we have our typical 66 sections, so 36 and 66 continues of what is existing and built. And then as we come around the curve, it narrows up. And we're anticipating crosswalks here as we get more into the design. This is just the drawing without the ortho. It might be easier to see. And this is what we're asking for today is for the developer to build this cul-de-sac as shown and have them build the sidewalk down to their property line. There will be a gap here as this is the McDonald's property I mentioned before. So unfortunately, we can't get that last piece across McDonald's property, but we had them build the sidewalk along their frontage with their development to kind of frame it. There are some units that are kind of fronting the sidewalk, so we thought that made the most sense. I definitely do anticipate a goat trail here in the future, but at least the goat trail won't go all the way up to here. So it's kind of the best we can do until this McDonald's site redevelops. So with that, I guess I would take any feedback on both options, knowing that the future alignments, we'll have to get cooperation from McDonald's, and this cul-de-sac option is what we're proposing today.
Sean, can you show with the McDonald's future option what happens with that sidewalk?
Yep. So it extends through their sites to Red Arrow. So this is a property line I showed before.
Yep.
So yep, it just doesn't extend that last because we can't do that until they come in with a project.
Okay. All right. Comments or questions for Sean? This one's a little different. Robbie, go ahead.
Yeah, it looks fine to me. I'm glad there's going to be more connectivity there. I was very confused by the two drawings, one with a cul-de-sac and one connecting all the way down to Red Arrow, but now it makes complete sense. I just didn't know what I was looking at before the meeting started. And I'm glad that it will actually connect down there eventually. So, I mean, I'm ready to move approval.
Yeah, we don't need if this is a review and feedback, so we don't need a motion, but if you're okay with it, I think that's what Sean needs to hear.
Okay, never mind.
Okay, thanks. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Sean, would you mind going back to the neighborhood plan map? Just want to make sure I understand things right. Okay. So first question, there's this like outline WSDOT freeway alternative. I think that's just basically because it's by an old document. I mean, that's basically the Verona Road project as it was built, right?
Yes, this was taken. I took this right from the neighborhood plan from 2005, so it's definitely somewhat outdated. But I just wanted to highlight the proposed street that we're.
Yeah. Okay, and then the dashed line extension of Red Arrow Trail. Sorry if I missed that. So that has already been built, or is that still part of the plan?
So that was, from my understanding, is that was an alternative that we could explore, but at this time, with how the Verona Road project turned out, we don't think it makes sense or is safe to pursue that.
Right.
Or it kind of comes out awkwardly, as the roundabout comes out. So I guess the Red Arrow, it comes out here. So that kind of is where that PED connection is. That's kind of outlawed there. So
okay, yeah,
it makes sense not to pursue that anymore.
Okay, yeah, just I figured as much that this was just like the way it was envisioned at some point, but no longer. And yeah, having that sidewalk connection, I think, is great. And yeah, so I think this is all good to me. I also appreciate you making the developer build the sidewalk, even though right now it dead ends. As you said, it will still be usable. And yeah, so sounds good to me. Thanks.
Okay, other comments or questions? There'll be a shorter goat trail, huh, Sean?
Yes, yeah.
Right, yeah.
It also defines the right of way. That's, another reason, so we don't have to, if there's encroachments later, it really defines it. So it makes it easier from that perspective as well.
Sure. Good. Other comments or questions? Okay, thanks much, Sean. So our third A.
Yes, let me easy with that one. So this last one is a repeat of one that we had. I came a couple months with. This is the American Center plat in East Park, and the proposal is Dreamer Drive is a public street connecting South Biltmore and East Park Boulevard, and Inspire Drive, which is a private street that lines up with what is existing at the Baker Tilly site on East Park Boulevard. And so this is kind of the plan for the area. The public street, like I mentioned, is in red, and the private street that is already built is over here. You can kind of see in the background, that's the Baker Tilly site, and they kind of have their central commons area. And this is the private street. And then eventually, they're proposing to build out the rest of the site with more apartments and potentially public street in blue. We're working out the details on that, but a street nonetheless. And the reason we're coming back is that we wanted to update some of the design from what we had before. As we got more information, we proposed bump outs at Dreamer and East Park that weren't there initially, and bump outs at this private street that may become public in the future in Dreamer Drive. So we made it more standard for a common area. And one of the other big things that we wanted to get feedback on was that we moved the sidewalk off the right of way, and it's now behind the curb. And the idea of that, and this was requested by American Family, was that to give more green space to the commons area, and allow more space for trees rather than having that, in between the, in the terrace area. So instead of having a standard 8-foot terrace, 5-foot sidewalk, we have an 8-foot sidewalk along the back of curb, and then the additional space is in their commons area, their green space. And that's what they're doing on their private street as well. So it's kind of aligned that way. And I guess another highlight that didn't change from before is that we're proposing a mid-block. Well, I guess it's kind of mid-block crossing, one crossing from the common area to the common area. At these two intersections just consolidated into one crossing. There is a proposed bus route that's stopping, north and south of this intersection. And the Dreamer Drive is a full access proposed, and the private streets, the islands here, so you can't go through it, just to minimize turn movements and conflicts. And another thing that this plan doesn't really show as well as it did before. So I'm going to go to what we showed before, is that we're adding buffer bike lanes as you go through the intersection, kind of a little bit of a retrofit. So 7-foot bike lanes or 2 feet buffer, and adding the island. So this is what I came with before. I didn't have bump outs, so we added those in, and then we moved the sidewalk. That's kind of the big changes. Otherwise, the intersection stays the same. And we were just looking for feedback. I think the bump outs were a good change, a good addition, but we were mostly looking for feedback on the sidewalk location on Dreamer Drive, and if we could consider having that up against the back of curb to allow more green space. So with that, I can take any questions.
Yeah, interesting proposal. Bill, go ahead.
Sean, I guess I'm concerned about having that sidewalk on the right to the back of curb about snow storage, because I foresee, that terrace is often used or isn't needed for snow storage. And as a general, I don't like sidewalks right back of curb, especially if there's any concern for vehicles speeding or even going the speed limit. Frankly, I'm not in favor of having sidewalks directly behind curbs if we can do something else. And so I'm not as concerned about the trees as I'd rather have that sidewalk further away from the back of curb. That's just my thoughts.
What is the issue? What are they going to do about the snow, Sean?
So this area is not plowed by the city. American Center does their plowing here, even on the public streets. So they had a plan where they would take the snow and clear it out of there, and not put it on that sidewalk. They're also responsible for clearing the sidewalk. So and their thought was that because they have the responsibility of doing both, they would get it done somehow. I think the idea was maybe they put it onto the sidewalk and then clear the sidewalk after by putting it into the commons area. But that was something that they had brought up, is that they were responsible for removing snow from both the street and the sidewalk. So they would figure that out.
Bill, you're shaking your head. Does that not address your concern?
Yeah, it does. It addresses it, but I'm not sure that's utopian thought that they're going to do it that way. But I'm concerned that snow is going to sit on the sidewalk. That's my thoughts. I'm sorry. I'm just,
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, you can't, if you're a pedestrian and they dump the snow on the sidewalk, you can't get through.
Yeah. I mean, I know we have to have, in some places, there's just not enough right of way, and you have to have, and we want the sidewalk, and so we have sidewalks right at the back of curb. And, it's kind of a, it's better than nothing, but I'd rather, where we have something new like this, I would just as soon not have the sidewalk directly behind the curb. That's just my thoughts. Thanks.
Well, Sean, you can take those thoughts back and see what can be worked out. Harold, go ahead. Was that all you I'm sorry, was that all you had, Bill? Okay, Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm glad to see this back. I was going to raise the same point as Bill about the snow storage issue. I think that is definitely a problem. I'm less concerned about the safety impact of having the sidewalk right next to the road, given the cross section and all of that. I mean, that's probably not a big safety issue. But yeah, the snow thing is concerning. I was wondering if that's something that you could take back to them. Since you realigned that, as you call it, mid-block crossing there in the middle of the green space, and the green space, does that need to have sidewalks on both sides, or is there maybe the option? Because, I mean, people don't need to walk along that green space, I think. Would there be an option to have basically a path going through the middle of it and then connect to the sidewalks on both sides of it, which, I mean, would allow you to have it, even if it's like 8 feet wide, you still have more green space. It's probably a better experience than having to cross mid-block and walk that little block over and then walk along. Does that make sense? I'm pointing at my screen, which obviously you can't see.
Sean, are you following what he's saying? It makes sense to me.
I am. So the thought, if I can recapture, was that instead of having sidewalks on both sides potentially, maybe they just do something through the middle, line up with the crossing as it is. And I do like that idea. That's something that we can ask American Family if they'd be comfortable with doing that. In lieu of those sidewalks. I think that'd be a good idea, and it would kind of enforce that crosswalk location as well. So that's something I can go back and ask them. About.
Yeah, if any other commissioners have concerns about, I mean, I'm a big fan of sidewalks in almost all circumstances, but since it is a green space, there's no on-street parking there, so that people have to get out of their car and get onto the sidewalk or something. I think this might really be a case where it's better to have like a path going through in the middle.
Yeah, it provides the pedestrian for potentially a better pedestrian experience. Bill, go ahead. Great idea.
I like Harold's thoughts. Yeah. I completely agree with in this case, less is better for the pedestrian. Yeah, it's having one really usable sidewalk down the middle that people can feel very comfortable and not have any cars around them at all. So,
yeah,
I like that. I like that idea.
And that would address your concern, Bill, with the snow too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What do you think of that idea, Sean?
Well, I like it. I think that, we'll go back to American Family and see if that's something that would work for them. I think, Bill's right. That would maximize their green space in that area. I'm not sure if they have a concept already planned for that area yet or anything, but that's something we can definitely talk about and see if they'd be okay with that change.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Ann. I jump in. I think then that could maybe change the way they do their maintenance of snow and not put any snow to the outside and just put it all to the inside and not have to worry about plowing twice and things like that, or plowing that sidewalk. I would think they would look at it and say that's a benefits them.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no, great idea, Harold. Other comments or questions? Okay, thanks so much, Sean. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, great. Right, we move on to item 6. As another step in our work on TC practices of equity and inclusion, we're going to have a presentation and discussion regarding helpful practices for inclusive meetings. Christy and Rebecca will offer some ideas for TC members, staff, and the general public to consider as they participate in meetings. So, Christy and Rebecca. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Some of you I've met before, but I'll just model an introduction. My name is Rebecca Hoyt. My pronouns are she, hers. I am a white woman with long brown and silver curly hair. I wear glasses with rose-colored tinted lenses. I have green eyes, and today I'm wearing a brown sweater, and I'm sitting in my home office that has lots of plants behind me. Christy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Christy Kumar. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I serve as the Equity and Social Justice Division Manager at the Department of Civil Rights. I'm a brown, Desi, South Asian woman with long curly hair that's pulled back. I've got glasses, a faux leather jacket, and I'm in my home office with books and art behind me.
But before we jump into the presentation, I just want to take a moment to do what has been shared with me and called an access check-in. So this is just an opportunity to kind of breathe into your body. We've all been sitting for a bit. And if your body is telling you that it needs a snack, please have a snack. If it's telling you you need to stand up or lay down or stretch or stim or fidget, please feel free to do any of those things and more, to take care of your body and your access needs during this presentation. As Anne mentioned, some of these practices are things that your commission may already be doing. Some of them might be new ideas. This is really like a small piece of a larger conversation about disability inclusion. But my hope is that after the presentations or discussion tonight, you'll leave with some ideas about just small things that make a big change in terms of creating a more accessible virtual space. Some of what we do, we're going to teach through modeling. So for example, we may kind of describe what we're doing while we're doing it as a way of sharing that information. My presentation style is very conversational, so I really encourage questions and discussion and thoughts throughout. If you have a question about disability, but you're not sure how to use the right words, or you're worried you might offend someone, I want to share that I really approach this as like everyone here has a desire to learn, and any question that fulfills a need that helps you make a more accessible meeting space or practice inclusion in your life is welcome. So Christy, do you want to share the presentation? Perfect. So as you can see, this is the helpful practices for an inclusive meeting. It has Christy and my name and our titles on the main slide. We can go to the next slide. So this whole slide is an image. So I'm going to provide what's called an image description. So whenever we are sharing screens, it's really helpful to describe any visual information. So that might be a map, a picture, a graphic, a graph or pie chart. So providing some kind of information not only helps people who have a visual impairment, but also people who might be joining your meeting by phone have limited internet access or just difficulty connecting with the screen. So on this slide is a photo of a tabletop. It has a gray geometric tablecloth, and on top of the table are bowls of blueberries and blueberry muffins. There's some cream splattered on the tablecloth and blueberries scattered about as well. And the reason why I share this image is because I want to introduce the concept of things being baked in the planning process. So Kathy Martinez, I don't know if she is the actual origin of the term baked in, but I'm going to give her credit for it. Kathy Martinez is an internationally recognized disability rights leader. She was the former president and CEO of Disability Rights Advocate and served as the Assistant Secretary for the Office of Disability Employment Policy with the Department of Justice. She's also a woman who is blind. And she uses the example or the analogy of if you want to make blueberry muffins, you have to have the right ingredients and you have to add the blueberries to the batter before the muffins are cooked. Often when people try to make spaces accessible after they are already built, it's almost like putting the blueberries in the muffin after it has been baked. It's really difficult to get that outcome. So as you plan meetings, as you engage with the virtual environment, think about having the right ingredients and really baking accessibility into the model and the practice of the meeting from the start in the planning process, rather than trying to add it in after the fact. Go to the next slide. So one way to plan for access is through agendas. I like to think of agendas as like an invitation to a space. So someone who has not been to your space, should be able to get a lot of information from an agenda. For example, who will be attending? When will the meeting be? How can I join? A good agenda that's accessible also has a short description of each agenda item in plain language. I would say this is particularly important for government because a lot of times we have projects or initiatives that have names that don't fully describe what that action item is. So if you have ABC initiative on your agenda, you may want to include a short sentence afterwards that maybe this is a discussion about parking placement on a particular street. Or if there's going to be a vote, that might be important in order to include on the agenda so that someone knows what to expect when they arrive at the meeting. Pre-reading materials and handouts are also really helpful. Often I hear folks say like people don't read materials in advance of meetings. And I really want to challenge that because I think the people who need them do use them and access them in much the same way that not everybody uses a ramp. But if you don't include a ramp into a building, it's almost impossible for folks who use wheelchairs to get in. The agenda should also give some information about what a participant can expect in the meeting. And have a contact person that lets people know who to reach out to if they need accommodations or language access. An example I like to use is if I invite you to my party and I say my party is, on Thursday at 4:00, and that's all the information you have, you might show up and realize, oh, it's a pool party and I didn't bring my bathing suit. So now I have to sit in a chair on the side and I don't get to swim. And so sometimes that's what the experience is for people with disabilities. It's very difficult, I'll speak from my experience, for me to ask for accommodations for a meeting if I don't know what's going to happen at the meeting. If I don't know if you're sharing your screen, if I don't know if it's a discussion or a presentation, if I haven't an idea of what to expect, then how can I ask for what I need in order to participate? So, when you create agendas or pre-read materials, they should really be sort of a gesture of hosting so that people coming know what will happen in the space and can have a person to contact to ask for things that they need in order to meaningfully participate. Christy, do you want to add anything?
No, I think that's great. I love the hosting analogy. We talk a lot about that with like social justice facilitation. Like you are hosting a space. Hosts have a lot of responsibility, and we feel that when we host a space. And so, like, I think feeling that sense of responsibility is a great analogy.
And I'll pause frequently for questions or discussions, because I think that is a good practice for accessibility too, rather than waiting till the end. So I'm going to pause here and see if there's any comments or questions.
I'm just going to throw a comment out there, Rebecca, that much of what you're talking about, certain of the TC members don't necessarily have control over that. Staff members are the ones who do the presentations. We plan the agendas, and staff and the BCC chairs work on the agenda items. So these comments that we're talking about tonight aren't just aimed at TC members. They're aimed at the general public. They're aimed at staff. They're aimed at the chair and the executive secretaries of these groups, so that we all can think about these things to make sure that we're doing it. But not everybody on this commission has direct control over those things. So we're being a little broader in our conversation here than just TC members.
Absolutely. I will say I staff the Disability Rights Commission, and I have asked anyone who's presenting materials to provide it in advance in an alternative format. So I think there is some agency that we have, but yes, these are very broad concepts. My hope is that you won't just use them at the TC meeting, but that you'll use them in any virtual space that you host or attend.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments?
Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe another thing that really nobody has influence over, I think, the accessibility of Legistar itself as a system to distribute materials can be a challenge, where, I think we on the commission now have a good way of how you get to things on Legistar, but I know for a lot of people that is really a challenge, navigating through 10 different attachments, but even getting to the agenda and then getting back from the agenda. So I don't know, that would be great for something for the city at large too. I know that's driven by a lot of legal requirements and why we do Legistar the way it is, but I think it makes sometimes things more difficult for us and for the public than it should be.
Yeah, Harold, talk about our Safe Streets Madison list. We had a huge issue with that relative to, we wanted it available in Excel because you have all of the, it was designed to be accessible so people could sort it and work with it. And, things that are stored in Legistar get converted into a PDF, and that totally destroyed the accessibility of the document that we wanted to use. And you're absolutely right about, Legistar is viewed as not user-friendly by lots of people. So that is a great point, Harold. Denise, go ahead.
Two things. I appreciate, I'll just put a pin in the Legistar conversation, because I know it does take me probably twice as long as it might take someone who is fully sighted to navigate the materials. And having attended a lot of city council meetings of other communities in the state, there's some different formatting. So, I know that that's outside the purview of this commission, but I'd like to plant the seed that we really do dig into looking at Legistar's accessibility and approachability, because I think it's terrifying probably for members of the public. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, and Rebecca, I'm really appreciating the presentation 100%, as I see Justin is on tonight, and so one of the things I really want to bookmark for our public hearing is I know that there will be presentations made by Metro staff, and so how are those staff being coached to make sure those presentations are made in plain language and very accessibly with description and all of the things that will really help our participating members of the community feel really like they're being talked to with dignity and clarity. And that's an ongoing concern of mine, is because that's out, we aren't giving those presentations, but I want to make sure that city staff are really well positioned to give inclusive presentations.
Okay, great comments. Anybody have any feedback on the comments that we just heard? Robbie, you're next. Go ahead.
Okay, this is something fairly simple that would make it much easier for even those of us who are fully sighted but using a small laptop screen. If staff could please use full screen when they are doing a presentation. Often there is a PDF or a PowerPoint or something like that, and we can still see all the stuff around the edges and the toolbar and things like that. And honestly, it makes it very difficult to read the presentation and see the maps or whatever is being presented. Even for those of us who have generally, corrected with glasses sight that is adequate for work. But that's just a request on my part. And I think it would make it much easier for everyone if we just remind staff to use full screen and not have all the stuff around the edges when they're doing a presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie. I made a note of that because we're working on some, Gretchen is from traffic engineering and is also working on some material on accessibility of materials for the Transportation Commission and others. So, and those presentations are aimed at staff. So I made a note of that to carry that forward. Denise, your hand is up. Did you have another comment? Nope.
I wanted to quickly respond to a couple of the comments before we go to the next slide. While there may be pieces of the system that are outside of this body's control, I think there are opportunities to lean into transformative justice and say, how can we care for our commissioners and the public who attends our meetings, and what are workarounds that the commission has an opportunity to participate in? So I agree, Legistar is difficult to navigate. I think it's also hard to know what you don't know. And so I would propose maybe a small demonstration of if you click on the agenda here, it'll take you to this link, maybe helpful for many folks in knowing that there actually are attachments to the agenda that they can access. We will talk a little bit more about materials later on in the presentation, but just a suggestion. All right, Christy, do you want to move to the next slide? So now we're going to talk about participating in the virtual meeting. So we planned, we have our agenda, now we've arrived. So a few things. The first one, should be pretty intuitive, but is extremely important for accessibility, is make sure your audio and visual connection is good. If you are hearing from folks in the meeting that your audio is not working well, I would suggest either pausing the meeting until those issues are resolved, or which might mean moving to a new location, wearing a headset, because oftentimes in meetings, I hear connection issues and folks will try to move past them without realizing that you may have left some of your participants behind because the bad audio or the not being able to see someone clearly or screen clearly really can exclude people who are participating in the meeting. I want to share I was at a statewide webinar that had over 500 attendees, and they were having trouble with the ASL interpreter. And instead of trying to just muddle through, they stopped and they said, this isn't going to be inclusive, so we need to reschedule. And I really appreciated that because it showed value for the disability community. And like, if we can't have you with us, then we can't go on. So I just want to share that experience with you all. The second tip is when speaking, position your face at an angle that allows participants to read your lips. Most of us do this in Zoom meetings, but I don't know. I have an aunt who every time I call her on video, I get like her forehead. So sometimes it doesn't quite work. But try, at least when you're speaking, to make sure that your face is sort of central to your, what I like to call the Brady Bunch box in Zoom. The third tip is to let your face and body talk when you are not speaking. If our communication was purely verbal, then these meetings would probably be happening by phone and not on video. So we have to recognize all of the information that is being shared visually during the course of the meeting. I really enjoy attending Zoom meetings that are within the deaf community because they're in the hearing community, we have this sort of like social contract about how we're supposed to present in Zoom calls, which is like, I'm very still, I'm not moving, I'm making eye contact with my screen, sort of stone-faced. But in non-hearing spaces, when someone's talking and you agree with them, you see a lot of head nodding, you see people like excited. There's so much body language happening that is communication within the virtual space. I also don't know for anyone who facilitates meetings, if you've ever asked a question in a Zoom meeting and it's like total silence, no facial expressions, and you like have a really difficult time reading the room, or at least I do. Like, I don't know how to interpret that silence, but if I see nodding or smiles or, head shaking no, terrified looks, like I have a sense of what's happening in the space. So as much as you can sort of shake off your conditioning to be a statue, that is really helpful for accessibility. Are there any questions or discussion on this slide? And Christy, is there anything you want to add? All right, hearing none, we'll move on. So when speaking in a virtual space, it's often a good practice to include introduce yourself each time you talk, especially if you're using an interpreter or captioning. And the reason why we do this is because if you are reading captioning, even if the person is introduced, it's very difficult, or if you're using a language line, to determine when is the point when someone stops speaking and the next speaker starts. So if you can imagine trying to follow the dialogue of a meeting without hearing the vocal cues of speakers, it's difficult to, even if I say, like I, for example, just asked Christy. So if she didn't introduce herself, someone might think Christy was talking right now. So making that a regular practice of every time you speak, this is Rebecca. Here's my thoughts on this, is really helpful. It also helps people who are joining meetings by phone to participate and understand who the speaker is at which point in time. The Department of Civil Rights also encourages the practice of saying your pronouns when you introduce yourself as a gesture of gender inclusion. as well as providing, as Christy and I did in the beginning, a brief visual description. A visual description is not necessary every time you talk. For groups that meet really frequently, it might be the first time that you speak in a meeting, and it's helpful to set that groundwork for folks who don't know you. It might be only when you have a new member or a presenter, or it could be each and every time that someone joins the meeting. That's a decision your group can make. In some more progressive disability spaces, I often see people also say when they are done speaking. So, I would say, hi, I'm Rebecca. These are my thoughts on, this project. And when I finish, I say, and this is Rebecca, and I'm done speaking. That's up to your group to implement or not, but it is really helpful for people who use interpreters. Number 2, we talked about saying your name each time you speak. Number 3 is speak directly to the person who's benefiting from an interpreter, not the interpreter. So if I'm going to pick on Christy, if Christy is attending the meeting using an interpreter and I want to ask her a question, I will actually address it to Christy, not interpreter. Could you tell Christy? That is generally fairly disrespectful to the person using the interpreter services. It's also important to speak at a normal pace. Sometimes when people read, they have a tendency to speak very fast. And the other tip is to pause whenever you're using the names of places or people. I can imagine this coming up when talking about street names in a particular space. And the reason why I suggest this is because often those people and places have words that are spelled out in sign language. So for example, I can say my name's Rebecca, but the time it takes to actually spell my name is quite a bit longer, and I'm signing my name spelling than it is to say it. So if you are throwing out street names, your ASL interpreter has to spell each one of those. And so it's really helpful to say the name, pause a little bit. Usually you can see the interpreter if you can, just kind of check to see that they're on pace with you, and move forward. Sometimes interpreters will ask for someone to speak slowly or to pause for a moment so they can catch up with the conversation. That is really important for making sure people are getting the information that you're sharing. So it's not meant to offend, but it is important to relay what your words are to the person benefiting from the interpreter. And again, if there are any issues with the meeting interpreters, for example, they need to switch or there's a connection issue, my recommendation is to pause the meeting until that issue is resolved and then resume. And a lot of these tips come from not only working with interpreters who are interpreting to other languages, but many times in my previous employment, I was bringing my own interpreter to non-spoken English speaking places. And so I have had the benefit of being on the recipient end of interpretation and sort of recognizing what are the things that I potentially miss when speakers don't sort of follow these guidelines. So I'm going to pause here. I know there are a number of interpretation services for the public hearing, so I want to really spend some time answering any questions or addressing any concerns that folks have.
Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. One of the practices that that Anne does, and I just want to call it out as something I appreciate, is when you go to call on any of us, you say our name. And as someone with vision loss, that's extremely helpful because I know who the speaker is, and particularly new to a group, I'm still memorizing voices. So, Rebecca, I just wanted to call that out as something that's very beneficial to those of us with vision loss, is either the facilitator or the individual themselves, making sure that they say their name.
Absolutely. And Denise, do you mind if I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
So often I've heard folks with vision loss say it's even more beneficial to hear the person say their name in their own voice. Do you find
Totally. Yeah. So sorry for cutting you off. Totally. Because what I'm doing is I'm listening to that voice and I'm making an audio memory of it so that when I hear it again, if the person forgets to say their name or we're more comfortable with each other, I now have the imprint of their voice with their name in my head.
Thanks so much, Denise.
Other comments or questions? We are going to have a rehearsal, and I think the interpreters are going to be there, Rebecca. So I am going to have an opportunity to meet with them because I want to understand how they're going to let us know if there are issues with the interpretation. I know they're going to be panelists, and so if they turn their cameras on, we'll be able to see them. So I think that will be helpful as well for the public hearing, that is.
Absolutely. And I would suggest when you decide what practices you want to implement, to practice those at the rehearsal. It takes a little bit of practice for me to get used to like saying my name every time I speak, or other practices that we've discussed here.
Yeah, it's just the chair and Aiden and Chris McCahill and staff who are going to be at the rehearsal, just to make sure we have all the technology taken care of. So,
okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we can go to the next slide. So in terms of language, and I know this was talked about previously, plain language is really important for reaching a broad audience. Not only is it helpful for people with disabilities, it's helpful for the general public. Particularly in government, where we have like lots of acronyms in terms of art. My particular disability, every time I have to say a word or series of words that I have learned as an acronym, it's almost like doing mental yoga for me to pull that out of my mouth, even if it's something that I encounter all the time, or it's something I know a lot about. It's just really difficult for me to sort of wrap my head around acronyms. Also, plain language will increase the quality of the translation. So the more generalized the language, the easier it is for interpreters to translate that into common language in Hmong, in Spanish, in Chinese, in ASL. So that is really critical for all spoken and written materials. The next practice is to use gender inclusive language. So if you don't know someone's gender, you might refer to them as with neutral pronouns. When we talk about residents or people, those are gender neutral terms versus the men and women of Madison or the moms and dads are typically like more binary terms. So we want to use the most inclusive approach possible. Another tip, and this is also particularly important for working with interpreters, is avoid using metaphors, acronyms, slangs, and idioms. My stepmom, her first language is Spanish. And so the way that she translates the don't throw stones at glass houses is don't throw rocks in crystal shacks. It doesn't quite come across in the same way, and it doesn't have the same meaning. It's sort of like, what is that sort of gobbledygook that you just said? So a lot of those sort of turns of phrase don't translate well. So as much, again, as you can use plain language and straightforward, direct language is really helpful. And then another tip is the city of Madison is committed to removing ableist metaphors such as crazy, insane, lame. We don't say people suffer from disability. I live and thrive with my disability, or describe people as high or low functioning. Those are really like capitalist assessments of how people are valued. Terms like duh, spaz, and many others are really hurtful and derogatory in the disability community. I'm going to pause here for questions or comments.
Comments or questions?
This is Christy. Can I just add something here?
Sure.
When we are decoding years of normalization around language that's harmful within like disability justice language and beyond, we will mess up and we will say things we have heard and we've been like programmed to say. I really encourage us to consider, if you say this is crazy, apologies, let me try that again. This is bananas. Like just try it. Just try adding something else. That's modeling that like, oh, I like recognize, I heard it, I said it out loud. And often to get to the place of removing language, we have to go through that phase of stepping in, like just like doing it and then realizing we did it out loud and then, trying to offer something else as opposed to sitting in shame about it. Because then you're just going to think about it at night and be like, oh, people, I said that and I didn't want to say that. So just try it again and keep it moving. And that really helps your own muscle memory around that.
Bill, go ahead.
Thank you, Ann. This is Bill. And I'd like to listen again to get a better understanding of number 2, gender neutral language. What kind of words and phrases that we use and what ones we don't use. If you could repeat that part. I don't think I fully appreciate what you covered in that session, that discussion.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bill. I'm actually going to ask Christy to explain it because one thing I have learned about accessibility is that when people ask you to repeat something, usually what they mean is, can you rephrase that in a different way? So I want to give Christy an opportunity to speak on this one.
Sure. I mean, this can come up in a lot of different ways. Many of the times that we do see it is in like openings. A lot of times we say, guys, it's getting really late, something like that, or like ladies and gentlemen. It's a lot of like binary language that we're using when we say ladies and gentlemen or guys. And so we're kind of creating genders for people in the room when we might not know the genders in the room unless we absolutely know everybody's genders, right? And so that's often where I see this happening the most is like those intros. And then you also like don't want to presuppose maybe an audience. So you'll say, like guys riding the bus, right? Like we've made an assumption about gender. And so you just want to stick with gender neutral, which might be something like folks, residents, people who live at the city of Madison, just any kind of language that's not assuming a gender.
Thank you. That now I appreciate that. So those terms make folks, like I like to use the word folks. That's gender neutral, right? That's correct. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Now I understand. Thank you.
Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to add on that something we've been reminded of before, and it's hard to remember that when someone's registered to speak, we ought to be just referring to them by their name rather than assuming their gender.
Yeah.
Yes, that's honorifics. Honorifics are very gendered. So honorifics refer to Mr. or Mrs. And so we want to stay away from honorifics unless someone has offered an honorific that they prefer.
Yeah. And that's hard for some of us. But Chris, you're exactly right. It's that's exactly what we're being encouraged to do, is to try and be respectful to people. And habits are hard to break. Habits of a lifetime are hard to break.
Yeah, and just another point about language. We're currently working with the city attorney to remove the word handicap from our city ordinance. I see Denise raising her hands and enjoy. It's language that was taken out of the ADA, the federal law, many years ago. I was surprised when I came here to find it in Wisconsin statute and the ordinance, but it has a very dark origin. But particularly in city services, and because it's in the ordinance, I just want to clarify, identity first is people with disabilities. That's kind of the default, unless you're referring to people as with disabilities as sort of a political group. Then it's capital D, disabled, or some people prefer disabled generally. And then when we refer to objects like parking spaces, buses, those objects are not disadvantaged or disabled in themselves. Like I saw a bench that was called a handicap bench. It appeared to be just fine, a typical bench. So those are accessible. So accessible parking, accessible entries, accessible benches. Let's move beyond that word that is not a word that the disability community ever chose for themselves.
Yeah. We had a great reminder during our discussion earlier from one of the alders who was talking about a continental crosswalk and described the continental crosswalk. And I think that's something that bears thinking about, because staff uses, and we as commissioners, as we get more comfortable with the technical jargon about traffic safety and things, improvements that we're talking about and interventions that we're suggesting, we, sometimes throw terms out there, and people who are listening may or may not, or even participating may or may not know what that means. And part of what we have to balance, and I'm going to throw this out there because everybody appreciates us not having 5-hour meetings, is the more that we stop and the more that we explain and the more that we try and add to the meeting, the longer they're going to take. So, I think it's balancing what works for our group with being as accessible as we can be. So those are just my thoughts.
Now we can move to the next slide. So Zoom is a visual platform. So visual information is really important in these spaces to make accessible. So one is when you're, and this is guidance you could give to folks who are joining your meeting, when you are presenting, make sure you use, or putting together materials, use high contrast colors, such as black and white. I will share on my computer, I use reverse contrast. So things that would appear white appear black, and things that would appear black appear white on my screen. And so when I get a document that doesn't have that contrast, the whole thing looks gray on my end. It's also easier to read just generally with the high contrast colors. Use for PowerPoints 44.4 slides and between 24 and 36 point font for information. And I think a good point was made earlier about if you're not sharing your full screen, you're essentially shrinking down the font that you're sharing. Include minimal information per slide. So if you are a presenter or you have a presenter who is spending a lot of time reading slides without any addition to the material, it's really going to decrease the font size, decrease the accessibility of that material. Having the visual cue of a small amount of text and then the audio cue of discussion around it is actually easier for the brain to process and hold that information. Avoid using slide transitions like a lot of animations or decorative fillers. And as I modeled earlier in the presentation, briefly describe any visuals. So that could be maps, photos, diagrams, any visual information. And then also it's helpful to use numbers instead of bullet points. Not only is it easier to ask a question about item 4 than to have to count down and go like, okay, on bullet point 1, 2, 3, 4. But when you have an ASL interpreter, they're actually going to note the number, and I'm signing with my hands the which point you're making. So someone signing this would say 1, and then sign use high contrast colors 2. And so it is relayed better through that interpreter. That's also particularly important because not everyone who uses ASL has written English as a first language. For many people who are born deaf or hard of hearing, written language is a second language. And so it's important to be able to provide the interpretation accurately. Lastly, let participants know if your presentation includes sound or audio or video. Just give a short warning at the beginning, not warning. The reason why I say warning is because for folks with auditory sensitivities, it can be very jarring to have someone start a video. You don't know that there's a loud song playing. A lot of times the volume levels are not equal in Zoom. So let your participants know before you start playing anything with audio. Also, if you're going to use videos in a presentation, if there isn't already a visual description in the video, it's helpful to briefly describe what's going to happen in the video ahead of time. So this is a video where 2 people are on the bus and they're talking about, going to the public hearing. Just provide some framework so that all of the information you are sharing is available to everyone in attendance. So any questions or comments about this section? And this is guidance I give to folks who mentioned they wanted to present at the commission that I staff as well.
Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, this will be helpful too, I think, for PowerPoints that also go into Legistar, is if there is an image embedded in the slide, to make sure that that's alt tagged so that as anybody's navigating the slide with a screen reader, we know what that image is.
Yeah, and I think Gretchen has that in her materials to remind people about that. Yeah. Other comments or questions? Not seeing any?
Okay, go to the next one. So this last slide is about screen sharing. So when you are screen sharing, and this was noted earlier, zoom in to documents so that fonts and graphics are readable. If you're sharing something that's not a PowerPoint and you want to describe an image, you might want to zoom into the piece that you're describing so that it's readable. A lot of people use their phone, laptops, very small screens. So for the general public, this is beneficial, but for people with disabilities, it's the difference between access and not access. Avoid high-speed scrolling. I am someone with light sensitivity, folks with visual impairments as well, or any vision sensitivities. When someone is like zooming through a document, it is really jarring and disorienting and hard to follow. Lastly, if you plan to share a screen, you need to provide meeting materials in advance. And I know the commission does this through Legislar. So directing people of where to find those materials is really helpful. What happens for me is sometimes I get invited to meetings. I don't know that there's materials that are going to be shared. And then I get to the meeting and now I don't have access to any of my assistive technology because it's not my computer that I'm looking at. So when the materials are not available separately, it really cuts people off from all the tools that they're using in order to participate in the space. It also allows your participants time to request alternative formats if they need them. It's fairly logical. If I don't know what you're serving for dinner, I don't know if it fits my dietary needs. I don't know if I'll like it. I need to see the menu before I know what I need and what I want to eat. So for example, folks mentioned Excel. If I know a document's available in Excel, but that doesn't work for me, then I know who to contact by looking at the agenda to ask for that information in an alternative format. So any questions or discussion around these?
One of the things that we've been talking about is, and why Denise brought to our attention, and I've been working on it with staff, is making documents more accessible and reminding people that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Denise, or if I say this improperly, that if something is screen shared in Zoom, it's not accessible to your screen reader technology, and you need to have it either emailed to you or saved in Legistar. So sometimes people just pop something on the screen that hasn't been saved ahead of time. So, we try and get that message out to people. And I've also heard from people that, you hate to have to ask for something in an alternate format. So thinking about, you did this tonight with what you sent us. Rebecca, you sent it in a PowerPoint, and you sent it in a different format so that it's accessible to people. So, this is a process, I think, and we're one group, and we can maybe do some of these things and consider doing more of them as we go. But the whole city will take some time to think about all these things, and trying to change Legistar is a really big deal. So. We all can make small strides and have small successes and be happy that we're doing that. But I think the more aware we become, we can't change if we aren't aware that change could be beneficial to others.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I'll just add to your comment about people not really liking to ask for accommodations or alternative formats. For me, what my experience is when I approached a space or something in the world that is not accessible, and now I have to ask for accommodations, it's a message to me that this space was not built by or for people like me. It is difficult to encounter those spaces, frequently. And often, sometimes I'm sure the city is really great about members of the public, but often people with disabilities are sort of put through the ringer to get what they need. Why do you need it? Do you really have a disability? These are really personal questions that are hard to participate in when it's like, I'm entitled to this under law. I'm trying to go to your party and you won't let me in. So that's often what it can feel like on the other end.
Alden Miadzi, go ahead.
Just wondering, can you just give a little feedback on how you would break down those barriers, right? So that people do feel comfortable in sharing that and vice versa.
Yeah, Christy, I'm wondering if you can take the screen down so we can see each other better. So I think that first, the blueberry muffin is really what I want to share, is that when we think about accessibility and inclusion, and hopefully do that in an intersectional lens, when we start, then we are planning for access and inclusion. And so accommodations are ways to fix systems that don't work for people with disabilities. But inclusive design and planning for access means, like, you belong from the beginning. We anticipated your needs and planned that you would be here when we built this space. So I think that's really important. And when people ask for accommodations, they are the expert on their needs. I was diagnosed with my disability in second grade. I'm very familiar with what works and what doesn't work for me. I'm quite a ways away from, when I was in second grade. And so when I encounter someone who's just met me and they have deemed themselves the expert, it is very frustrating.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think sharing information with staff is going to get at a lot of the things you talked about tonight, Rebecca. So I think that's one of the things that you all can work on throughout the city, because some folks don't know how to make materials accessible. And I know you're working on a guide to make that information available to staff, because we don't prepare the presentations, most of them, and we don't make the presentations. So it's harder when somebody is sending us something that's not accessible. So I think we have to sort of go to the source there.
And I think that's true. I think as a commission, when you notice the presentation is not accessible, you can sort of pause and say, okay, wait, presenter, we're going to pause so we can describe the images, or we're going to ask you to enlarge your screen, or, sort of address things in the moment. And that's really what I mean about leaning into community care and transformative justice, is making
right. I'm thinking about efficiency, get it right from the start. Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just really echo what Rebecca said, that we do have a responsibility to set expectation that materials that come to this body are accessible. And, I know it's going to be a learning curve, and there will be, do-overs, and that's all fine. But if we communicate that this is an expectation of this body, then we hold the bar higher. And, I do that in my own work. If someone's doing a presentation or doing something that I don't have full control over, I do still set the bar to say my expectations are that we create access for everyone, and this is what that's going to look like. So I do think as commissioners, we have responsibility to name what we want to see.
Okay. Well, and thanks for helping call it to my attention originally, Denise. And, I wouldn't have realized there was a problem if you hadn't. So we wouldn't have been able to do something about it, which Gretchen is doing. So other comments or questions? Well, thanks very much for coming. This is, again, another in our next step. Was there more? Sorry.
Never mind. There was one more slide.
I thought it was the end. Sure. Christy and Rebecca, did you have anything that you wanted to share at the end?
I just really look forward to continuing the conversation. I see you as a body of change makers within the city, and I look forward to collaborating with you so that we can fulfill our city's mission of accessibility and inclusion.
Yeah, and I'll just add that we wanted this to be practical, so there's like a list of things, and sometimes it's hard to absorb all of that, and it's not really about embodying it right away, but it's like embodying the notion that this is an important value and fumbling through it, right? And so hopefully there was like a nugget that you remember that you might start to practice or implement within this body and beyond.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Other comments or questions on this topic? I did make some notes to share with Gretchen, who wasn't here with us tonight. I should have thought to invite her. Other comments or questions? Okay, thanks very much for coming this evening. Good to see you both. See, we're being visual. Thank you. Okay, Next, we have adopt a 2023 meeting format for the Transportation Commission. We have to get our meeting calendar in place, and we've had some discussion over the course of the past year about meeting format. So I thought that it was important that we talked about that first before we looked at the meeting calendar. And we have the virtual option continuing, which we've been doing in person or hybrid. And before we talk about the options and what you think we should do going forward, I just want to mention that if we do adopt continuing in the virtual meeting format, that one of the things that I was talking with staff about was having a spring or summer in-person get-together with the commission, not a meeting, just at the Union or Monona Terrace rooftop or something where for those who are interested, we could get together and just have an opportunity to chat and have a meet and greet kind of thing. So it's not a meeting where we got a bunch of stuff that we have to talk about. We can have an opportunity to say, hey, how are you doing? That kind of thing. So that's just one thing that I was thinking about if we do continue in the virtual format. So comments about the meeting format. Harold, go ahead.
I'll just state my preference, and maybe this is reflective of discussions we've had about the public hearing and about this topic in the past. I think the virtual format works for us. I do really appreciate and you bringing up the option of maybe getting together in some other venue. I think one thing that was cut short by the pandemic, I think we had at some point a plan to go to like the new metro maintenance facility and get a tour of that or something like that. So maybe that's another option, like maybe get to look at the new electric buses or something like that. So I think for the meetings, virtual has worked as well as it could for many reasons. So I would be in favor of continuing to do that. I think going back to in person, for me personally, would be really, really difficult.
Yeah. Harold, thanks for reminding me about the tours. We do have those for new commission members where we talk about that, but there were some things that we had in the works that did get derailed by the pandemic. So great reminder. Thank you. Chris, you're next. Go ahead.
Thanks. I may be one of the few, but I would be in favor of having the option to go back in person. Just a couple reasons are that I have at this point seen the difference between working in groups and onboarding staff in person and remote. And I do see a difference with the option of being in person. And there's trade-off inconveniences. Like obviously I like to be able to take meetings from wherever I like, but sometimes I'm not always able to get home in time for meetings. So like I still have to commute after this meeting. So there's just considerations like that. With that said, I wonder, Anne, if you have any insight on the option of hybrid meetings anytime in the future. I know it came up for the public hearing, so there must be discussions about being able to move towards something like that.
So my understanding of the hybrid meeting options and the limitations is that right now, only the Common Council chambers are set up to do it, but they're in the process. Sarah Edgerton mentioned that they ordered equipment to make other rooms available as hybrid, like the room where TC used to meet in person, the old courtroom in the Madison Municipal Building, available as hybrid meeting rooms. So right now that's the issue is, supply chain issues, everything has put things behind in that regard. So last I heard it was January 2023 at the earliest, but I haven't heard any updates. So I'll have to check on that.
Okay, thanks.
Denise, you're next.
Yeah, thanks, Ann. Thanks, everybody, for this conversation. I strongly prefer the either hybrid or virtual option. I love the idea of get-togethers and field trips because I would really enjoy the opportunity to meet all of you in person. And even when we did the work with Brandy Grayson, you know, kind of coming out of our usual meeting context to interact with each other was awesome. I loved it. A virtual option for me is the way that I can participate. I have no problems taking Madison Metro and arriving, and at 5 o'clock, you know, this time of year where it's still light, but it's already dark, and I would not feel safe both as a woman and as a woman with vision loss, you know, waiting for the bus, not knowing exactly what time our meetings are going to be done, and then needing to take the bus home, you know, especially as the square and downtown area are not busy and with commuters. So it would be a really fundamental safety boundary for me to, it's not something I would be willing to cross.
Okay. Thanks, Denise. Bill, you're next.
Thanks, Ann. I really have learned that virtual has worked. I would not have thought that 3 years ago, pre-COVID. I just couldn't imagine not getting together and having our meeting at the city county building or at the city municipal building. But I do think, and I agree with a couple of the other speakers regarding would love to get to some of the field to see some of the new, just some ideas, you know, electric buses, some of the renovations that the city has instituted, and some of the technologies to, you know, like hands-on, like some of the parking equipment now that they've got. They can show it, you can put it on the camera on the screen, but I think it'd be nice to, you know, put some of that in a field trip kind of a kit. I'll put it in the terms of field trip, but I guess the only question I guess or I have is if we do that, if it's considered to be an official meeting, then we have to notice that
we do
that the public could also participate in that, I guess, if we're going to do that. But you know, I don't know. I don't have to ask Steve if that's
we do.
Yeah.
If we're going to have a potential quorum, we do have to notice it.
Yeah. And then that means the public would also be able to participate, I guess, right?
They could. I don't recall that ever happening on any of our field trips we've had in the past, but it is
right.
possible.
No, I don't think they did. I don't know if even if it was noticed. I mean, I don't think we really had any public participation, but like you can call it whatever you want, an open house or whatever, you know. You don't have to have punch and cookies, but just, you know, can they come to see the new renovations at the bus barn, you know? So I mean, I'd like to see some of the changes that the last couple of years we haven't. And as far as getting to know each other, I agree that when we've had some of the training it would be nice to maybe sometimes we can do it, but and I think, you know, just as far as time of day and things like that, people's schedules are such that when we meet at 5 o'clock, that's yes, there is, you know, the darkness and the time we get done and so forth. But anyway, I think the virtual works for majority of our business, and like to see that continue. But I do see a need that we could get together for some of these field opportunities to see some of the infrastructure of what we're working with. Thanks.
And it is totally possible for us to have our standard meeting format be virtual and have these tours and field trips and, you know, meet and greets be in person, just so they're, you know, carefully noticed so everybody knows where we would be meeting and what would be happening. That would be a possibility. So thanks, Bill. Is that all you had? Darren, go ahead.
Thank you. I think I would be in the Chris camp there. I I would support at least a hybrid option. I think, for me, being a new commission member, not only being able to not interact with any of you, and I've really appreciated those who I've been able to meet outside of these meetings at different functions, but even just seeing people who come to speak and it's just a name on a screen, and there's no person there. It's just this voice in the ethers coming across. I think that loses something for me. So I would at least like to explore a hybrid option.
Well, and the hybrid option does mean that people can still participate over Zoom. So PC members can still join over Zoom, or they can join in person. But I think that we are limited by the availability of the spaces for hybrid meetings. So that is certainly something that we would have to explore, because the room would have to be available for us in order to do that.
I understand. Thanks.
Yeah.
And just personally, I spend 8+ hours a day on a screen. So coming in and spending another 3 or 4 hours in a meeting is just really taxing.
Sure. So other comments. I have some comments, but I'll wait till everybody else has had their turn. Okay. Well, in terms of the virtual, that would be my preference. I think having a virtual format allows better access. We haven't had quorum issues with the virtual format because it's much easier for people to join. How many times have we seen people walking, and joining, either traveling in their car or walking home or whatever? With COVID and health issues, it's easier for people. I think it's having the virtual option for the public to join us is very important, because I think it's more accessible for them. And that can be true on the hybrid option as well. Bill, go ahead. I'll finish after you make your comment.
You made a good point, and I'll just as an example, the last meeting I was in home quarantine because I tested positive for COVID. So I was able to participate because I was in the room by myself.
Sure.
I have no idea what this winter is going to bring us.
I have no idea either. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So personally, if in person is voted as fully in person is voted as the way that we go, I would likely be resigning from the Transportation Commission, because for health reasons and various other reasons, it would be very difficult for me to make that commitment to be there in person at every meeting. So you would have to move on without me. If hybrid is chosen, I would likely resign as chair, because the chair has to be in person in the room in order to run a hybrid meeting. So I would be comfortable continuing on the commission, joining virtually, but I would be resigning as chair. Stefan, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I don't normally chime in on these things. I'm not really authorized to make statements or anything, but I did notice that you mentioned that January of 2023 would be the soonest that other rooms would be available for hybrid. And I'm almost positive that it's mid to late 2023
wow.
that any additional rooms would be made available. You can obviously check that and everything, but that's the latest information to my knowledge. And that's after testing and, everything that comes along, the equipment, the testing, going through the workflow and everything else. That would have to happen after that. And then the other thing too, I think that it sounds like accessibility is a really big factor for you all with the body. So having to explore the accessibility factor within the hybrid meetings, I think there's probably some elements that you all might consider that maybe Common Council hasn't necessarily considered, as far as maybe ASL or captions and whatnot, virtually and in person or whatever. So that would also be another consideration, especially for hybrid. Anytime you kind of mince, two different platforms, you're kind of dealing with multiple forms of different modalities, I guess you could say. So it kind of makes things a little bit more complex. So I don't know if that would put off the timeline, but certainly a consideration on IT's front. So I just wanted to mention that.
So you're suggesting that hybrid would likely be something we would have to explore later in 2023?
I think that it would be a process. I don't want to speak for the team that would actually be administering it, but I think it would probably be a process, not just because they potentially would be looking at different rooms and everything, but also with your accessibility concerns, that adds kind of another additional dimension that I think Common Council hasn't necessarily explored all the way, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So just another consideration. I just wanted to add that. So.
Okay, so I would actually like us to take action on this. So is someone willing to make a motion? Harold?
Yeah, in light of what we've heard, I move that we continue with the virtual meeting format for 2023.
Robbie, you're next.
I'll second that.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to have a virtual meeting format in 2023. That does not, I'll just say this, that doesn't mean that we can't reconsider that at some point during 2023 if hybrid becomes more accessible, I was going to say, easier to use and better to meet our needs. So did you wish to speak to your motion at all, Harold, or?
I mean, I'll keep it brief because, the arguments have been brought up. I think it is one very strong argument, and that you have said that in a hybrid or in-person format, you would not be available as chair anymore. And I think that would be a great loss for the commission.
Oh.
And so that is a very strong consideration for me. And with regard to the hybrid format, in addition, it seems like, we may not have the option to do so right away. Even if we had, I would really like us to try that first if we ever were to do something like that, because I think there are many unknowns related to the hybrid format that we may not realize until we actually have done it, with regard to accessibility, with regard to how meetings work, how the dynamics between people in person and virtual, or whatever the right terms in this case would be, are. So I think, as Bill has said, virtual has worked with some limitations that I respect those concerns that Chris and Darren have brought up. But let's try to work on that, but keep the virtual meeting format. Thank you.
Okay, Bill, your hand is up.
Thanks. And I completely agree and support this, but I would like to add, and I don't know whether it's an amendment or not, but I would like to investigate that we try to get to see some of the technologies and facilities that we are talking about, like the bus barn and electric buses and so forth. And so whether it's a field trip or something, obviously, sure. I mean, maybe I'd like to do that in person, but I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that, whether you put that in the motion or not, I already have it written down, and I'll be talking to Justin about that as the first one in terms of timing and how we would go about doing that. And then if we do move forward with the virtual option, when it's a little nicer weather out, and in deference to what Denise was saying and my needs as well, maybe when it's, summertime, when it's light longer, and we can find a good time that works for everybody, that we can get together, and that would give us several opportunities to get together on in person. Some of those tours would likely be during the day, which is what we've done in the past, as opposed to in the evening.
Yep.
So
thank you. Yeah.
Sure. Further discussion. Would we like to have a roll call vote, because people were On different, okay, well, we'll assume a unanimous consent vote. If anybody wishes to vote no or abstain, please raise your hand. Okay, we will move forward in the virtual option. I have some notes to talk to all of staff about potential field trips that we can have, and we'll certainly explore a meet and greet in person when the timing works for that. And I will stay on top of the hybrid option, and as that moves forward, as that becomes more available, as more people, more BCCs take advantage and have experience there, maybe we'll learn more about that. So we won't lose sight of that as an option. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Next, we have the meeting schedule for 2023. It's mostly the second and fourth Wednesday at 5 o'clock that we've had in the past. Aiden did a lot of good work to make sure that we didn't hit on any of the holidays or common council meeting days that are prohibited. And so there are a few places where a couple of months, I think, where the dates are a little different, similar to what we had this year. But other than that, it's our standard meeting calendar. Any comments or questions about the calendar or schedule? If not, we need a motion to approve and adopt. Chris?
Yep, move approval of the calendar.
And Alder Miadzi, I assume that's a second?
Yes.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, we'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. Please raise your hand. Okay, the motion is carried. Next, we have report from the Transportation Policy and Planning Board, and a couple of interesting things at the last meeting. Chris, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I think two things probably you're thinking of. One, relevant to some discussion earlier this evening, Complete Green Streets. There was an update at the last meeting, so folks can check that out. The key things being some new standards in terms of widths of lanes and sidewalks and bike lanes and stuff, and other stuff that's interesting. So do check that out. And then I had mentioned earlier that the city was updating its policy for street assessments, how it charges folks for assessments, and that got approved by the board. From a high level, it's to make things a little more predictable and spread evenly across households, and I think also to make it so that when we're trying to do things like sidewalks and that kind of stuff, the assessments aren't part of the equation, basically. So
yeah, if I could just add on the Complete Green Streets, what I found really interesting was a couple of the tools that they're proposing to use to look at the various projects. So that you know if it's in compliance with Complete Green Streets. And there was a chart as well that, I found that was a tool that I know I'm going to have sitting next to me every time we look at one of these things. So those are two tools that this is the first draft I've seen. Chris, I think the first time we've seen them, isn't that right? Yeah. So please take a look at those and let Renee know if you have any comments on them, because we're the ones who are going to be using those tools, in terms of the, like our discussion tonight, they're going to be using those tools. We're going to be using those tools to try and figure out if they're in compliance, and they're going to be held to that standard by a checklist that they're going to have to fill out. And then there's a chart that, make it easier for us to remember what it is. So, Bill, go ahead.
Thanks, Ann. Yeah, I had an opportunity to sit in on that, on both the green streets, but also the assessment policy. And I think after that gets approved by the council, I think we should have a presentation about that, because so often now, as we go into some of these projects, we're the first committee that the public has an opportunity to speak up to anybody in the body in the city about. So we hear about some of these projects, and the assessments is obviously a big deal. And I like what the Policy and Planning Board has done with that. I think there's a lot of good work that went into that. I've always been concerned about that people, in a nutshell, was if you get a letter in the mail and it says they're going to do a street project next year or whatever, and it's almost like you have no idea how much it's going to cost you as a property owner, what that project is going to entail. Where this now is pretty predictable on what you can expect to see on your assessment. And I like it that they balanced it out, if you will, and you don't have to wait until after all the bids come in to know what the prices are and so forth, of calculating how much your sidewalk is going to cost you and so forth. I also like the idea that the sidewalk repair program will not be assessed to property owners. It's going to be, if it's a bad sidewalk, it's going to get fixed, and the property owner does not have to pay for that. I like that. So I think there was some good work that the Policy and Planning Board did with that. But I think it's very important for the Transportation Commission to understand what these changes are, because I think they'll help us. I really do, as far as public comment that we have on some of these projects, because we actually see these before they go to Public Works and the public hearings. So we get the public hearings first. So it's good work, Chris.
Excellent. Alder Miazzi, go ahead.
I don't know what else to say. Bill just said it all. No, but I was just gonna, if I could add something to it, it was great work. Also, too, another flip side of it is things that they added in there. Looking through an equity lens as far as assessing people that was not talked about. That was the only thing that Bill didn't mention as far as the equity lens. But it's great work, Chris, and the whole board. You guys did a great job. I want to commend you guys on that.
Thanks, Alder. Chris, go ahead.
Just want to make sure city staff gets most of the credit for that.
Yeah, you bet. I made a note on our future agenda topics, presentation on the new assessment policy once it's approved. And I think we should do that on Complete Green Streets. I mean, we've all been following that as well, but I think having just a good, solid presentation once it's approved so that we, can understand how it's all going to work will be really important as well. So that was a big meeting on Monday, Chris. Yep. All right. Other comments or questions? Okay. I don't have any announcements, so we can go right past that one. So our items for a future agenda, it's a little different this time because usually we have potential agenda topics for the next meeting. Well, our next meeting agenda has already been posted, because the next one is the public hearing on November 9th. And that agenda was posted 2 days after our last meeting. So that has already been set. In terms of future meetings, it looks, according to what I saw from Aiden, and we'll confirm this on Monday, that we won't have any other topics. Go ahead, Bill. Did you have a comment on that? I can't hear you.
Yes, I would like to go back to about the hearing, if I could, without getting into any details, I'd like to talk about that just briefly in the format, and it's maybe more to Justin, to ask a question to Justin about the hearing.
Yeah, well,
of the materials. Did we received the materials today, or at least maybe it was yesterday, and I had a chance to look at those.
Yep.
Are those the materials that will be given? All the materials that will be given to the public before the hearing?
Yeah, we really can't talk about that on the agenda, but yes, all the materials are posted on Metro's website. So the public hearing, which is on the agenda, lists everything that we'll be talking about. Those items are in Legistar and on Metro's website, and we're going to have a link to Metro's website. I think Aiden said we could do that in Legistar so that the two are linked together, because Legistar can be a little weird to move around in. So we're trying to make it as accessible as possible. Okay.
I guess then if I have a question on the materials, I can call somebody, call Justin.
Absolutely. Call Justin or Mike Chuckfall.
Or Mike. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mick's on vacation for the next week, I think it is. So call Justin, or would that be right? Justin, call you or call Mike Chuckfall or Jesse Stammer?
Yeah. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Any of those will do.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure, you bet. So in terms of future meetings, you can see that the November 30th meeting is also going to be a really important one, because the public hearing will be adjourned to the next meeting. And we won't have discussion as posted here. We won't have discussion at the public hearing. That discussion, deliberation, and vote on all those implementation details will happen at the November 30th meeting, as well as a Common Council resolution that will be referred to TC relative to the Metro network redesign. So that plus we'll try not to have too many other things at that meeting, because that will be a long meeting. So you'll see the list of future agenda topics. I will add presentation on new assessment policy once it's approved by the Common Council. And I think we should also add presentation on complete green streets once it's approved by the Common Council, just because I think we all just need to have a really, really good understanding of that once it's approved and in place. So we know how to deal with it going forward. Other items for future agenda topics. Anybody have anything? No? Okay. Well, another great meeting, and thanks everybody. We need a motion to adjourn. Everybody's favorite motion. Harold.
Certainly mine. Move adjournment.
Okay. And Bill, is that a second?
That is a second.
Now I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote. And thanks everybody. Stephen, I'll answer your email now that the meeting's over. So thanks everybody.